Today is April 14th, 1975, and I'm interviewing Silvia Neulander, Neulander, in Jerusalem, Israel.
When I originally approached Jean, it was not only for this movement from Prague to Pilsen and then to Salzburg and on to Italy, they went from there, but because I had met on the streets a lot of Jews who were just roaming around, and I asked them what they were doing there. They told me that they had been in camps in the British zone. Well, I don't know if you know how the British felt about our DPs. They felt that every Jewish DP was a potential illegal immigrant to Palestine, and they were right. Most of them were. But what they did was to misinform them, and that was really a shame. They told them that that if they would return to their homes, and most of them were from Eastern European countries, I would say from Poland, Romania, places like that, that they had learned that they would get full restitution for everything they lost. Well, it was a colossal lie. There's absolutely no truth in it at all, but it was a means of getting rid of them, because once people went into the Russian zone, it was very hard to come back, because the American army and the British army said that we're taking care of people who are here, but our job is not to bring people back into the zone. However, once they got into the American zone, I must say that the Americans were very, very nice to them and treated them like any DP. I can't say the same for the British if they got into the British zone. So what I did was to get some people to watch at the border between the Russian and the American zone, because the trains that the British sent them in could only go as far as Pilsen. They had to get out there, and there they were picked up by trains going into the Russian zone. So I had someone wait and tell me whenever there was a train that came in, and I went up to them and explained what the situation was. I said, if you want to go home, bakasha, that's your privilege, you go right ahead. But don't believe what you've been told, and if you'd rather stay here and wait for resettlement, either to go to Palestine or resettlement somewhere else, we can take care of you. That's our job. That's what we're here for. And I must say that most of them got off the train and came back with us. And they were put up in the camp too. So that was when I first got in touch with him, because this was really a desperate situation. When a trainload would come in, people started floating around the city.
So what would Rabbi Lippman do?
Well, he went to the camp and made the arrangements then about keeping them for several days with this friend that he had from Pittsburgh. And then these other things, they developed. Things just snowball. Once you're working in you never knew what you were going to do.
How was it that you got a hold of Rabbi Lippman?
Well, I tell you, when I saw the job was getting bigger with all these people floating around, and I was there alone. There was no one else in Pilsen with me. And actually, I was not in club work in Red Cross. I was doing civilian war relief. I don't know if you know what that was. We were attached to military government. We were social workers. And when we took a camp or a community, when it was conquered, the military went in and took care of all military personnel, allied and enemy. We had to take care of allied and enemy civilians. Mm-hmm. That was our job. This was called Red Cross Civilian War Relief. When I met Chote Shai, he was with a brigade in Italy, and he came up to Germany, and through the Sachnut in Paris, a meeting was arranged. He told me to try to get into Pilsen because of this problem at the border. Well, how could you do that? In civilian war relief, there was nothing we could do. So I went back to Red Cross headquarters and said, look, there's nothing more I can do in civilian war relief. UNRWA is moving in now to take over. Let me do some club work. And this shocked them, because that was way down in on the Red Cross ladder. They said, would you do it? I said, of course. So one of them said, we need somebody desperately in Marseille for the boys who are going home. I said, no, I don't speak French well enough. I'd rather go to a country where I can use German and I can get the local people to help me. I said, what about a place like Czechoslovakia? Isn't there anything open there? Now, I knew there was something open there because Chote Ishai knew that they were looking for club workers. That's why I decided to ask for club work. And they said, would you go there? I said, of course I would. So off I went right to the spot that I needed to be. But of course, I didn't know exactly what I would have to do there. And when I saw that there were so many people, and I did have to do something about controlling the job that I had there too, I went to the 19th Corps, which was the one Jean was with, and asked for the Jewish chaplain. And a nice young man with a nice round face and rosy cheeks came out and tried to make me comfortable, pulled up his seat and offered me candy and cigarettes. I said, cut it out, Rabbi. I said, I have no card to be punched. I said, I have another problem. I said, do you see any Jewish refugees around here? He said, yes, hundreds of them. I said, what do you do about it? He said, nothing. I said, why? He said, I don't know what to do. So I said, well, you come.
So in other words, up to that point, Rabbi Lippman did not know what to do.
No, he wasn't.
He wasn't involved in any way.
No, not in any way. So I said, come to my place this evening, and I'll talk to you about it. I said, in the meantime, I'm going to ask you to do things that are not strictly according to military regulations, but I'd like you to write to Judah Nadich was then the senior chaplain in Europe, and I said, I'd like you to write to Judah and ask whether it's okay to work with me. And when you get a response, you send a letter by courier, but if he says it's okay, then you come down and we'll do.
Did you mention to Rabbi Nadich what you were doing, the type of work?
Judah knew, he had an idea, and he knew who I was, and he knew if there was something that had to be done, I would be involved in it. Oh, but he did know, because when I was in France, I first worked with Jewish DPs in September of 1944 in Vittel camp in France.
Right.
So he knew about it, because he was then stationed in Paris. So he got in touch with him, but at any rate, that same evening he came to see me, and he said he was ready to go to work. So I said, well, you couldn't have heard from Judah yet. No, but he said it was all right. He knew it was perfectly all right, and he was ready to go to work. So I explained to him, first of all, that if we were caught, it could be serious, and in the army he could be court-martialed for it. And he very sweetly said to me, are you going to do it? I said, yes. He said, if you do it, I'll do it. That was really just how we started to work. That was it. And he was just marvelous throughout that whole operation.
Was there anything that he hadn't mentioned in his
Well, for
summary?
example, with these trucks that we even got some of the boys from the carpool to go out and try to get trucks and put them together, assemble them so that, trucks that were left on the road that were damaged during the war. And they did it. It wasn't a very secure thing, because even though they made one truck out of 4 or 5 or 6, they broke down easily, and it was quite dangerous for us at times. But at least they tried to help. And then, of course, when the war ended in Europe and everything was going to the Far East, it was almost impossible to get gas. But we collected it through some of these boys that he knew from 19th Corps. And at one point, I think we had as much gasoline as the military did.
Now, how would you characterize Rabbi Lippman's role in this activity? You prodded him into doing it.
I didn't have to prod him. That's the wrong word.
Well, okay, fine.
I spoke to him about it, and really, I didn't know I was so scary. Do I look that scary? No, he was
now
just...
that I know you from reading about you, I am.
No, I'm really not. I went to him, and I would never have pressured him into doing it. First of all, because he was a very young chaplain and had just come over. He was not in Europe during the war. Right. And I knew that he could possibly get into trouble, and I warned him of all this. But I don't think I really scared him. I think
No, I wasn't suggesting that you scared him, but you...
And I don't think I pressured him. I just told him what the problem was.
You told him and how to deal with it.
And how to deal with it. And what we did when we went to borders, it was funny. We went there with a few cigarettes or a bottle of whiskey and gave some of the Russian border guards a slug of whiskey. And for whiskey or a couple of cigarettes, we got hundreds of them over the border without any difficulty at all.
By having the chaplain there, how useful was it?
Well, it was this. There were lots of times when I couldn't do things, when he did things, and then he in uniform. I couldn't get out all the time. I went into Czechoslovakia, into Prague, which was in the Russian zone, and I went as far as Košice. But
how would you spell that?
Kosice.
Mm-hmm.
And I went as far as that, but I couldn't do it all the time. I need someone else who could do things when I couldn't do things, or could do things where a man was needed and where I couldn't get away with it. So that he was most helpful. As a matter of fact, at that time, they were talking about some of the things I did, you know, amongst the people that I knew from Palestine. And believe me, and I told them right from the start, and I told them on my first trip to the United States, that Jean did a whole lot, and without him I could not have done what I did.
So you became a team.
Yeah, yes, very much so.
When you're working together, sometimes he initiated things, other times you initiated, or were you really?
No, there were some things that he did on his, many things he did on his own. When he went to Prague, for example, or to Theresienstadt, he went in on his own then.
Mm-hmm. Was there anything else about Rabbi Lipman that you wanted to tell me about? He mentioned, of course, about your intervening with General Huebner. It's Hubener. Huebner.
Yeah.
On behalf of Rabbi Lipman when he got caught with a transport.
Yeah, well, you see what happened. I had connection with General Harman was the one, I thought it was Harman, and maybe it was then. At any rate, it was a very strange situation. I met General Harman when I was stationed in Braunschweig, Germany with 8th Army headquarters. And we went on a trip to Paris together in one of his planes with some of his aides and I don't know what not. And he was a little indiscreet, and I let him have it. And I was most surprised one day when I was working in Pilsen when I needed so much for DP, so we didn't have a bakery and we needed very badly, we weren't getting enough supplies. And I would go into 18th Corps and ask Colonel Reinhardt, for who was one of his aides, for this, that, and the other thing, and they just said they couldn't get it. Well, one day, Colonel Reinhardt appears at my office with General Harman, or I should say General Harman with Colonel Reinhardt and a couple of others in tow, and I see him, and we are both very much surprised to see each other. So I thought, you son of, I shouldn't say that now, but at any rate, I thought to myself, you son of a gun, I'm going to fix you, now I'm going to get what I want. And he asked me how things were, and I complained bitterly that I had a lot of men coming in. I didn't say that they weren't soldiers, but I said I had a lot of men coming into Pilsen, and sometimes they went to some of the other places that were under Red Cross control. But I said it was just shameful that I didn't have either accommodations or supplies for them. I said, we need a bakery, and I know there's an empty bakery here. It's not working, and I asked for it, and I can't get it. So he turned around and he goes, Colonel so-and-so, see that Miss Neulander gets this. Then he turned around, Colonel so-and-so, see that she gets this. Whatever I asked for. Even to when I went home, and I was not supposed to, they are not supposed to give you passage to the United States. They can only book you as far as Paris to Red Cross headquarters. Then Red Cross decides whether you go by boat or plane. He gave me orders to go right to the States, written orders, because I just had him under my thumb then for a slight indiscretion, but he was feeling like a heel when he realized how I reacted and what happened. And so that I could get most things. When we had trouble at Hof, at the border at Hof, when Jews were coming in, and it was stopped at one point when they said that they were coming in, that they were, what was the expression they used? In organized groups. And so then we asked for a definition of an organized group. And the organized group was over 100. So I went to our people at the border at Hof and I said, look, I know it's been going very easily, but cut it out. 100 is maximum. 99 would be better. We sent them through at 99 at a time. But sometimes they got a little over ambitious and put more on the trucks than they should have put through and send them through. But they would come through, and occasionally they got stopped by a very, very proper MP, who was going to do exactly what the book said he should do. So I went to see General Harman. So he said, Miss Neulander, you know this is organized. I said, I know no such thing, General. He said, well, you just see that they keep it under 100 and there won't be any problems, so this is what we did. And there are things like that. I did have the contacts with some of the men because of my work before that with the Army. See, during the war, Red Cross was the only civilian group that could travel with the Army. Mm-hmm. so that it was very interesting and very satisfying. I certainly didn't go to Europe because I like war. I went there because I had hoped that I would meet some Jewish refugees and be able to do something. And as far as I'm concerned, it's the greatest thing that ever happened to me in my life. I don't think I've ever done any work as important before or after.
I noticed in your interview with Judith that there was no awareness on the part of individuals in the Jewish community before you left. They talked to you about the possibility of dealing with refugees.
In the States before I left?
Yeah.
Now let me tell you what happened. This is exactly what happened. I met several social workers who tried to get into Red Cross, and whether people will admit it or not, Red Cross is a very anti-Semitic organization. I had some experiences that were shocking.
International Red Cross or American Red Cross?
Well, the American Red Cross, and I bumped into it with the office of Harvey Gibson, who was who was sent here to in charge of the whole Red Cross operation here. And I found, but particularly the American Red Cross, I found it a very anti-Semitic organization, and then I found a lot of it in the British Red Cross. Now, the girls that I met in the States who wanted to go over were qualified people who should have gotten over and could have done a job with Jewish refugees. Eventually, they came over after the war with UNRWA through the Joint. So I decided I was going to get in. I just didn't care what. And so I made an application, and they asked you to give a resume of, well, from the day you were born almost, not just the work that you did. And so I rammed my Jewishness down their throat. So they couldn't dare eliminate me because I was Jewish. And my references were Rabbi Stephen S. Wise, Cyrus Adler, Louis Finkelstein, all the people, but who were so terribly Jewish. And I told them that I had taken courses at the Teachers Institute of the Jewish Theological Seminary, that I was the daughter of a rabbi, the sister of a rabbi, that I had done some Jewish community work. And I had been to Palestine, I don't know how many times. I rammed it down their throats. Well, I know that they send people way back to Yonkers where I lived, and I left Yonkers when I was 10 or 11 years old, my family. But they went back there to find out if they knew anything about the family, any possible communist connections and that, because people that we knew there told us that they were interviewed. But at any rate, I was then called before a board. I had an interview with the board, and they welcomed me most graciously. And in fact, I went over with 120 people on the Queen Mary, and I was put in charge of the group, which surprised me no end. I must say I had other run-ins with both the Army and Red Cross, and anti-Semitic, not towards me, but I stepped in because of the anti-Semitism there. I did have one personal case of anti-Semitism, but I think that in the long run, while they didn't like my guts, they had a tremendous amount of respect for me, because I fought as I did for what I knew was right.
What about the anti-Semitism in the Army that you encountered?
Anti-Semitism towards the Army people? Well, that I don't know too much about, but I can tell you this, that even in the very first camp that I worked in Vittel in 1944, mind you, long before the war was over, I asked for, I found 400 Jews in the first camp I was in. I don't know if you saw this in the interview. I think I may have mentioned it to Judith, I don't know. But at any rate, I found 400 Jews there, and they were desperate. They didn't know what to do. This camp was called an Austausch camp, an exchange camp.
Yes, that's right. I do remember that.
Yeah. Well, I organized them and made arrangements for them to go to Libreville in the Vosges Mountains. And when I asked for things for them, Captain Wall, who was in charge of military government there,
Captain Wall?
Wall, from, I think, Philadelphia.
W-A-L-L?
Right, not Jewish. But who had been worked on for a long time by Lady Doverdale, who was from the, you read that?
Yeah, I read this.
And
This is part of
then
the,
you know the story, and it's there. Because there, when I asked for things, they just said to me, look, they didn't have it for 4 years, they can do without it now.
Right.
Just that sort of, it was a shocking thing. But as you went along, you found less and less interest. When we first got into some of the bad camps, they were horror-stricken, but they got over it very quickly. The people certainly didn't have eye appeal. They looked pretty wretched, and they had no sympathy for them because of that. It was a shocking thing, and I was more convinced than ever that I did the right thing by fighting my way into Red Cross by whatever means, getting in there and getting to camps, because I felt then, as I felt many times before that, but it was reconfirmed that only Jews are really going to help Jews. There are individuals, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah. Did you, were you surprised the lack of activity on the part of the JDC?
Oh, don't ask me about JDC, because I was ready. We had a real war, JDC and I. I don't know if you know about it.
No, I don't.
Well, I met Chaplain Marcus, and there was a wonderful guy.
Robert Marcus.
Bob Marcus was a great guy, and he's really dead because of the heartache he had here. And I really think so. He had just worked himself to death. And not here, the heartache he had in Europe working in the camps. I met him, and we had arranged, that he said, what are we going to do with all these kids here? We have orphan kids here. I said, Bob, hold them. I will go to the Sochnut office, Jewish agency in Paris, and I'm sure I can make some arrangements for them. And they promised me at the Jewish agency office that any person that I organized, they would take care of and arrange to send to Palestine. Legally, illegally, but they would.
That's the transport that he took to
France, to
France,
Paris.
and then from France to Palestine?
Who?
Marcus.
No, he didn't go to. No, he didn't.
On one transport, he went to Palestine.
Probably when I was not there. But at any rate, I know Jean went on one transport. I don't think Bob did.
Well, according to the reports.
Well, he may possibly.
Yeah,
I was away for a while. I went home for.
No, I'm just trying to find out. He saved people from Buchenwald. Is this what we're
That's
talking about?
right. And I had found in Hillersleben a group of Jews who were in what I knew from 8th Army headquarters were going into the Russian zone. So I went up and said to them, scram. You've walked before, pick up your bags and go. As soon as you get to the American zone, you have no worry. They don't want you there, but they'll keep you and take care of you once you get in there. So they told me they had many orphan children, and they said it's going to be hard enough to take care of ourselves. When we go, who's going to take care of these children? So I went back to my headquarters, 8th Army headquarters, and I asked for transportation. They told me that they were not first I asked Red Cross. They said they were not setting any precedents. They were repatriating refugees. They weren't bringing them into the American zone. I tried to explain what the situation was, but they'd have no part of it. Then I spoke to Colonel Craigie, and he said practically the same thing. Well, I knew Colonel Craigie, and the thing that scared him more than anything in the world was communism. He was an independent telephone owner out in Iowa. So I said to him, Colonel Craigie, what do you think is going to happen to the children I want to take out of there, about 90 or 100 children I want to take out of there, if they fall into Russian hands? And he says, well, I don't know. And you could almost hear him saying under his breath, I don't care. So I said, I'll tell you what's going to happen. I said, there are going to be about 100 more little communists that you can, I said, 100 more little Bolsheviks that you can start worrying about. Do you know that he gave me 2 trucks to go up there and get those kids out? It was amazing, but see, he had to be scared himself into doing it, not because it was the right thing to do. He just had to be scared personally into doing it.
How would you spell his name?
I think it was Kraege. But this was how he had to work, and you had to be very careful. I didn't mind making bets with him about who could drink more whiskey at night, and of course I couldn't drink too much, but I had my cohorts who made believe they were filling my glass all the time, and we kept him very well supplied and got very much of what we needed from the army warehouses for the DPs that were moving through. But there was very, very little sympathy. Here was my Colonel Craigie was in charge of military government there.
Craigie was in
military government with the 8th Army.
Mm-hmm. Which was where at that time?
Braunschweig, Germany. That's where I was when the war ended.
Mm-hmm.
But I had been with them through South Limburg, Holland, and up through Germany into Braunschweig. I was with the 8th Army all that time. 8th Army headquarters.
Now, so this group went to, of 90 or 100 children?
Well, I took them to Buchenwald, and then Bob eventually, he was notified that they were to take 400 children from Buchenwald, the 300 he had.
He was notified by whom, by the way? Do you remember the whole story?
Yeah. You see, the Jewish agency said that they would take care of any kids that we brought into France. They would take care of them and move them on. And one day I was at the Joint office. You see, Joint was stymied there. They couldn't move during the war. And when things came, they got messages, people wanted help from the States. Even the State Department wrote them about one family. And they couldn't do a thing. They couldn't get out of Paris until the war was over and until UNRWA organized them, because they were under the aegis of UNRWA. So I used to go in there to see if I could help, because I could go back and forth over the borders. And one day they told me that there was that they had a request from General Lear. You know who he is, the Yoo-hoo general. Mm-hmm. They had a request from him to go after 5 girls who were at a camp in Germany. Their nephew was with the army when they were liberated, just happened to find them, their 5 sisters, and bring them out to France. Their relatives in Texas wanted to get them to the States as soon as possible. Of course, Jordan couldn't do a thing. So I said to them at Joint, I'd be very glad to do it. And while I was there talking to them, I did that job for them. I brought the 5 girls out. Colonel Boyle was with me. I'm not going to go into all the details about that. I also brought out 2 people that the State Department was looking for. The husband of the woman was a professor at a yeshiva in Pittsburgh, and I got his wife and daughter out. And then I went to JDC, and I learned one day that Bob's group of 400, I don't know who made the arrangements, but they were coming to France. They were coming to Paris on a certain day, I think it was on a Shabbat, and that 400 were coming, and 100 were going to be made wards of the French government. I don't know if you know what that means. If the French government contributes 5 cents towards the upkeep of a child, they have everything to say about it. They are wards of the government, and they have everything to say about what happens with them. Well, I was wild when I heard this, and I was also informed by JDC that there was a request that no Jewish organizations be represented at the reception they were giving to these children. The French Red Cross. You asked JDC. I'll tell you in a minute why, though. There was French Red Cross, and there's a military band, and all sorts of dignitaries. And I went there, too. I went there. I was not in a uniform that signified I was Jewish. I was still in Red Cross uniform then. So I went up, and I just said to the person who was controlling the gate that I showed my military identification. I said, I'm here for the reception of these children. They let me through. Bob got off the train, and I said, Bob, do you know what's happening to these kids? He said, you're asking me? He said, I thought they were going to stay here while they're on, and then were to be en route to Palestine. I said, do you know that 100 are being taken as wards of the French government? They never told him a thing about it when the 400 children were released. So I called JDC, and they told me to soft pedal it, that there was somebody connected with Jose, with a very wealthy man and a big contributor, and he had made the arrangements with the government. And I said, you stand by it. I said, do you think we can afford to lose 100 kids? Well, there's nothing that can be done about it. I said, oh, yes, there is. So I called in the newspapers. There's a big article in the Herald Tribune of that date, whatever it is. I may have it, I don't know. But the Herald Tribune on its first page carried a story about European governments vying for children. That was the way I put it to them, that they were to be gun fodder for the next war. And there was an awful noise. And there was a woman there from the Committee for Refugees and Deportees. And I went up to her, and I said to her, what's happening to these children? She said, who are you? And I told her I was from Red Cross, and that I was acquainted with these children, that I had brought a lot of the children to Buchenwald before they came here. So she said to me, they're in France now, we'll do as we please with them. I said, what? I said, these kids are here now because Hitler said the same thing, that he would do what he pleased with them. She was wild because I said that. But I didn't care. And I said, I'd like to know what's going to happen with them. And again she repeated that they're in France now, we'll do as we please with them. I said, well, we'll see about that. That was when I called in the papers, and there was quite a scandal. At any rate, we had these kids held up. We told them not to move until either Bob or I said, go. Finally, we decided it wasn't fair to hold the kids there, you know, have them in the middle of the thing. We'd let them go to the hotel. They took them to the Lutetia Hotel. And they were assigned rooms and told to wash up and come down for lunch. And they came down, and of course I went down to see them, and I knew a lot of them, certainly the 94 that I brought from Hillersleben, and a lot of the others that I met through Bob. And I was talking to them, and one of the women came to me and said, look, we don't think it's fair to disturb the children while they're having lunch. I felt that was very reasonable. So I went upstairs on a balcony where I could look down. I walked out, and about a dozen nuns, French nuns, went in, from table to table, patting them on the head, talking to them. That was all right. They didn't disturb them, just I disturbed them. And of course, and I pointed that out to the people at on the Herald Tribune when they came there. And there was quite a scandal. Then I went into the Lutetia Hotel, and I spoke to the kids, and I told the older ones to take care that they didn't take any of the little kids away, and I told them exactly what was happening. And I told each one, someone to organize and assign a little kid to one of the bigger kids. You know. And pretty soon I was having difficulty getting in to the Lutetia. At every door they knew me, and I wasn't permitted to go through. And one day I came there, and they're no longer there. So I got a Jewish chaplain, I've forgotten who it was, one of the young Jewish chaplains there. I got him to find out where they were, and we drove up to the place. They put them in some resort somewheres, and I went up there, and of course there they hadn't been told. They didn't expect me to find them. So I told them, I said I'd like to see the children. I was in Red Cross uniform, always got us through. So I talked to them again, and they told me that the kids were being bribed by French priests and nuns who came there and dangled toys, dolls, and beautiful clothes in front of the kids and said, if you stay here, these are the things you're going to have. If you go to Palestine, there's trouble, there's this, and that, and the other thing. Well, of course, again, I said to the older kids, it's up to you to see that nothing happens. And when they came, they finally tried to make a deal with me. They said that they would select 100 children, and we could take the rest to Palestine. I said, fine, you submit your list to me. I knew what was going to happen. They were going to take all the little kids. And that's just exactly the sort of list they gave me. I said, no, I don't accept this. I said, these are children I want. I'll give you a list of 100 kids. And of course, I took all the kids I knew wouldn't go. And I gave them a list. Well, we had such trouble that they finally gave up in disgust, and all 400 kids went to Palestine.
Well, what was Rabbi Marcus's role in this?
Well, you see, he was the chaplain at Buchenwald, and he was most kind to the children when they were there, and he escorted them as far as
Paris, but that was it. And yes. If it wasn't for you, they would not have been...
Well, we wouldn't have known. I just heard by accident. And when I said to the JDC, they said to me, at that time, they said to me, don't mention Palestine when you... I said, what do you mean, don't mention Palestine? So he said to me, Rosenwald and Beerwald, who are our biggest contributors, aren't the least bit interested in Palestine. I said, you know what, Arthur? This is Arthur Greenlee. I said, I don't give a good goddamn what they're interested in. I said, I'm here to help these people, and if they want to go to Palestine, that's where I'm going to help them to go. If they want to go to the United States, that's where I'm going to help them go. I said, but what would you suggest? He said, let them go back to their Eastern European countries and reestablish a Jewish community there. I said, you know, Arthur, they're sick and tired of doing it. I said, suppose you go back and try. You live there and reestablish a Jewish community there. But this is what he had the chutzpah to tell me, that they should go back and because Beerwald and Rosenwald at that time were not the least bit interested in Palestine. So that was why I had to fight, and this was why I called in the newspapers. And then I sent a letter to the Jewish agency here, told them the whole story. I sent one to Hadassah. I sent one to Stephen Wise, copy of the same letter. And immediately after the war there was a conference in London. And Rabbi Wise came to me and said he'd like me to come there with Jean if we could possibly get away, so we got permission to go. And we didn't tell them what for, but we got permission to go. And Joe Schwartz and all the others from JDC were there. And the Jewish agency had mimeographed this letter I sent, and every delegate there had a copy of it. And of course I was interrogated, and I said I'd defy anybody in JDC to tell me this is not true. And Joe Schwartz was sitting there just shooting daggers at me with his eyes. They hated my guts, and to such an extent that when they sent people over after that from the United States, each one of them was warned not to cooperate with me. Some of them were my friends and told me about it.
They were not to cooperate?
No, because at that time, after I came back and worked with the Jewish agency. I was senior representative of the Jewish agency at Army and UNRWA in Germany. And they were told not to, and don't think they didn't, and many, many times tried to get in my way. This was JDC, because they weren't Zionists at the time. They're Zionists today, because if they didn't get on the bandwagon, they wouldn't have jobs.
Had you ever told the story to anybody?
Isn't it in that report, Judy?
Perhaps, yes.
There was quite a scandal for a long time about that. Such a scandal that once, I don't know if you know, there was the Eternal Light program at the Jewish Theological Seminary.
Sure.
Well, I got a letter from them one day. They wanted to interview me. They wanted to put a program around some of the things that I did. And they got some of the money for that program from the Joint, and the Joint told them that if they put me on the program, they wouldn't get any more money from me.
I'd like to ask you about specific chaplains.
Yes, which one?
Judah Nadich, you mentioned.
I think he did less than anybody. I'm sorry to say this, but he was...
I'd like to know that.
All right, now Judah was stationed in Paris mostly. First he was in London.
You read his book?
I didn't read it because I'm so mad at him for his whitewashing Eisenhower in the camps that I didn't really read. I shouldn't be that... I don't have it here, and I should really read it. But we used to be very good friends, and I haven't spoken to him since. When I came home, I told him what I thought of him over the phone. But what happened was he was sitting first in London, and he had a good life there, and he was visiting with all the important Jewish people who lived in London. Then he went to Paris. Long after the invasion, he came to Paris, and his big job was handing out... He worked with another chaplain there, a boys' chaplain. They were handing out Magen Davids and Salem and mezuzahs and that sort of stuff, and Sidurim, and so this was the big job he did. And I followed him. He went to South Africa on a fundraising mission, and I was sent there for youth aliyah. And when he told stories of how he put his hand in an oven and pulled out the ashes, it was still there, I just thought to myself, you're a nice liar. You got into Germany a long, long time after the ashes were cleaned out. But I think he did less. What?
Most of it's a fabrication?
I think. Well, I don't know what he said he did, but I think he did less than anybody I know there.
Well, I'd like to know specifically in terms of
I'd like to see it. You don't have a copy of
Yes,
the book
I do.
here. I'd
Yes,
like
I
to
do.
see it, and then I'd like to talk to you again about it.
Okay, fine. I think that's
Because I don't know what he said in it, so it's unfair to
but
to say that what he said is a fabrication. I have the vaguest idea what he said.
okay, fine. Well,
I was too mad at him at the time to want to read anything he wrote, and
Okay.
still am mad at him.
Well, that's what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
So I'll bring you the book,
Yeah,
and then we can discuss it another time.
yeah.
But what I'm interested in knowing is, did you ever call upon Nadich for anything and refused?
I want to tell you what happened. I once had a very sad experience with Red Cross in England. I'll tell you what happened. I went over to do hospital work. It's a hospital social worker. When we got there, they took several of us who knew other languages and who had a lot of experience and who had been to Europe before, so we understood the mentality of some of the Europeans. They asked us not to go into hospital work when we got to London, because when the invasion took place, they said, and if we were involved in hospital work, and they knew they were going to be sending the soldiers back there to the hospital whenever they could, they said they would not be able to take us out with the invasion forces. So they asked if we would take some other work, club work or something else in the meantime. So I said I would do it until the invasion took place. And then one day we were called to London for reassignment. It was around the time of the invasion. But just before that, there was a new letter sent out that the Army had requested, I think, 300 civilian war relief workers. Now, it was the prize job there, and we couldn't make application for that job. What happened was the Red Cross told Army that people would make application, they would pick out several hundred that they thought were best qualified for it, and from those they would let Army take 50, and the rest had to be recruited in the States, trained and recruited in the States. Well, I was fortunate to reach the 50. And one day we got a call that we would be reassigned, and there was, I think her name was Laurie, who was in charge of hospital workers, and she was in London, and I went to see her, and I told her that I wanted to transfer. I told her over the phone that I wanted to transfer to civilian war relief. So she invited me in to see her, where she was billeted, not at the office, and served me a beautiful tea, and everything was fine. And I told her I wanted to go to civilian war relief, and she begged me not to. She said, look, you've been doing club work, and Torpy, who was the supervisor for club work in Europe, came to her and asked her to release me from hospital work to do club work because I'd done such a good job there. And she said after the build-up he gave you, said, I'd never release you, so I don't want to release you now to civilian war relief. But I said, it's what I really would like to do, it's what I want to do. And she said, no, they needed me too badly in hospital work. All right, so we sat around and talked, and then she wanted to know what I did. You know, my past history. So I told her that I worked with a TB hospital in California, and she worked with one in Michigan. And then I told her I had been to Palestine in the early 30s, 1934, and I was doing working in infant welfare stations for Arab children. And she said, oh, was that a government job? I said, no, it was a job that was being done under Hadassah. She said, Hadassah? Is that Sinai organization? I said, do you mean Zionist? She said, yes. I said, yes, that's the other one. She said, what were you doing with them? I said, what? I happened to be a Jew and a Zionist, and they were the only ones working with Arab children, and so I went to work with them. Well, suddenly she's clearing the table, and she's cold as ice. She didn't know I was Jewish up to this point. And as I was leaving, she told me that I told her I had to go back and finish what I was doing. I would need a week or two to break someone in on the job that I was doing for Torpy. That was in Chelmsford, Essex. So, and she said to me, well, that's the maximum. Come back within 2 weeks. I want you here for reassignment. As I'm going out, she said, look, don't come back until I call you. She said, I'll phone you. I'll let you know. So I thought to myself, this is it. But I'm not going to jump the gun. I just decided to wait to see what happened. And sure enough, I was in touch with my colleagues, and they were all being reassigned. So I called her on the phone one day, and I didn't understand. It was not a clear connection. I don't know whether she didn't understand me, but at any rate, I gathered that she didn't want me to come back and told me to stay there. So I said, I can't understand you, and I'm coming down. So I came down to see her. So she told me that since I was doing such an excellent job in club work, and since Torpy wanted me so badly, and since all the jobs in hospital work had already been filled, she decided to leave me there. I said, no, I'm not staying there. This isn't what I want. if you don't want me in hospital work, I said, that's perfectly all right, but I've been accepted for civilian war relief, I want to go there. She said, no, you're going back to hospital work. I said, no, I won't. She says, yes, you will. I said, well, we'll see about that. So I picked myself up and I went to see Harvey Gibson. It was very hard getting in to see him. Everybody wanted to know what I wanted, and I wasn't going to tell anybody but Harvey Gibson. I said, if it weren't a personal matter, I wouldn't bother to come here, and he is the only one I will talk to. So I finally saw him, and I spoke to him, and I said to him, you know, I'm here as a hospital social worker. I would like to get into civilian war relief, and I've been accepted, but Miss Laurie, I'm sure that's her name, will not release me to go. I didn't say she wouldn't release me from hospital work. I said she will not release me to go into civilian war relief. And I said, you know, I think I'm suffering from a little bit of anti-Semitism. Oh, he said, quite the contrary, Miss Neulander. And he pulls out a sheaf of cablegrams back and forth to the United States asking for more hospital workers. They're desperate. The invasion is taking place. Said, on the contrary, they need you there. Well, they said, if they need me in hospital work, I said, then I know now that I'm suffering from anti-Semitism. And then I told him exactly what happened, and that I was being left in club work. And I showed him a letter where she wrote to me and said that since I was doing such a good job, I was to stay there, and so forth and so on. Well, he was shocked, and I had him trapped, you know. So he said to me, would you rely on me to take care of this? And I knew I had him right where I wanted him. I said, Mr. Gibson, I came here because I knew that you would take care of it. So he said to me, where are you staying? I said, right now it's such and such a hotel, but I was ordered to go back to Chelmsford by Miss Laurie. He said, will you just wait there for a couple of days at the hotel? A couple of days later, I got a call from Miss Laurie. And she asked me to come in for reassignment to hospital. And I said, no, I'm not going into hospital work. I'm going into civilian war relief. Because I figured if I went to hospital work, she'd send me in front of the front lines, you know, when I got down there. So she said, no, you come in for a reassignment into hospital work. I said, no, I'm not going to. She said, well, we'll see about that. I said, we certainly will see about that. And I picked myself up and went to Gibson's office again. This time I had no trouble getting in.
That's it. Side 2. Okay.
So I went to Mr. Gibson's office, and I told him what happened, and I said I actually would be afraid to work under her, and I would not feel comfortable with her, and I want to go into civilian war relief. So he said, I'm going to do something I've never done before. He said, over the head of a department, I'm going to assign you to civilian war relief, and he did, and that was how I got into that. While this was all going on, I spoke with Judah. And I told him I was going to start a scandal about the whole thing. He didn't even want me to go back to see Gibson. He wanted me to soft pedal it. You know, all these people who want to get in right with the powers that be disgust me, but he really didn't want me to pursue this matter. He just wanted me to drop it. Well, I thought it was important enough to pursue. And I finally got what I wanted, and I was very fortunate to get into civilian war relief. And because the first thing, I was on a team where there was one other Jewish girl and a good anti-Semite, Lady Doverdale. And when we got to Maastricht, and from there they went into Aachen, you know, and that's how they got into Germany, she rushed right in to help the poor little German children and open a kindergarten for them, and she wanted me to soft pedal what I was doing for the Jews, which I refused to do. That was my aim, to do just that.
Now, was there anything else with Rabbi Nadich?
With Rabbi Nadich, no.
Was
No.
the general impression from the people that you worked with was that he was not doing the job?
We didn't see him any place doing anything. When he got into Germany, it was a long, long time after everybody had been in and things were. I don't know. Look, let me say this. I'm not going to say he didn't do a job because I don't know what he claims to have done. I would like to see the book first, and then I'll discuss it with you. I don't want to say anything more about him until then.
All right. Now, you mentioned briefly about Joseph Miller.
Joe Miller. Yeah.
Were you? You said that he was going around collecting children and anybody he could. Was there anything that you remember in great detail about his work?
I know that I met him in South Limburg, Holland. I think he was stationed in Heerlen then or somewhere around there. And he really went from community to community and helped wherever he could with the Jewish people. He also he attended the bar mitzvahs and the weddings and things. I don't know what not he didn't do. But he was doing a nice job there with the people. They had tremendous love and respect for him because you knew that he wanted to help and he did everything he possibly could for them.
Anything else about that?
I don't remember him today. You know, it's a long time ago.
I know. What about the GI Council? Were you familiar with what he was doing at the GI? This was later on, 46.
No, I was back there. I was back there in 46. I met him there too.
This was in
but
Frankfurt.
I don't remember. I was back in Frankfurt because then I came back for the Jewish Agency. And
well, this was a group of Jewish soldiers that met with him.
That's right. Now, I'll tell you, oh yes, he organized them. They used to take care of kids when they had their time off. As a matter of fact, I think I have some photographs of the soldiers with the children. Yes, he organized that. He was a good soul. He really did a nice job there. And he was particularly interested in the young people and children.
Did you have any contact with Rabbi Herschel Schachter?
No.
With Rabbi Max Browdy?
Max Browdy, yes, but there too I don't remember too much about what he did. I did have contact with him.
Mm-hmm. Rabbi Klausner?
Abe Klausner did a terrific job.
But you don't remember anything about him, any stories, any activities that might have...
Any special stories? No. No, I think I've read some things, a lot of things that he did. I think they're pretty accurate, some of the things that I think he really did it. He was a go-getter, and he stopped at nothing. I can tell you that. If he wanted to get something to help the people, he did. He was almost a tyrant going after the things he wanted. But he knew what he wanted to do for them, and he went after it. And he did a whole lot in organizing the Central Jewish Committee. He did a terrific job there. That was quite a piece of work, and I think that he should get most of the credit for it.
Now, what about Rabbi Abramowitz? Did you know Rabbi Meyer Abramowitz, Mike Abramowitz?
No.
He was in Germany from 46 to 48.
You see, I worked more closely with these people, with the chaplains during the war. And just a few of them that I worked with after the war on Aliyah Bet. Now, I knew, although I didn't see him during that period, that Eli Bonin was at one of the stops on the way when Bricha was moving people through. That I knew, but I didn't see him, and I didn't... See, I always felt it was best to contact as few people as possible if I didn't need them. Because I didn't want to get involved, I didn't want to involve them. Because they had much more to lose than I did. I was not in the army. I was a civilian attached to the army. So that if we needed them, of course, I stopped at nothing if I could use them and if there was something they could do for us. But
you don't remember anyone in particular who you had contact with aside from Rabbi Lippman?
Well, his was the closest contact, and Bob Marcus. The others, I would just meet in passing. They were at a place for a little while, or I was there for just a short time.
What was your general impression of the chaplains?
I think the chaplains, on the whole, did an awfully good job. They really did, because they didn't just stick to the army. They found refugees. They worked with them. And for a lot of them, it was not on their schedule, not on their... Just as it wasn't on mine, it wasn't on theirs either. But they knew that this was what had to be done, and they did it. And I think that... I wish I knew more about them. I didn't know who they were. I knew some of them were doing it, and I wasn't in touch with all of them. But as far as I remember, and from the stories I heard from DPs, as they moved from one point to another, they were getting tremendous help from chaplains. I think that we can be proud of what the Jewish chaplains did during that period for the most part.
Was there anything negative that you may have heard about?
No, I heard one negative report, and that was not confirmed. On the contrary, I heard things quite to the contrary about the particular chaplain, and that was it. I was told that one chaplain was not doing anything, and in fact was not willing to cooperate in any way with any illegal move.
Who was this?
I don't like to mention the name, but there's no doubt about the fact that he did a good job.
Well, I would know anyway, so.
What?
I mean, I would know whether he was working or not.
He was.
Who is
Eli
this?
Bonin.
Oh, there's no question.
Well, of course, and you see the report we had then was that he was not willing to cooperate, that he wasn't doing things, and he wouldn't do a thing that was against Army regulations, and it's not true. But these were the first reports I got, and he was another one I was almost going to get mad at, because I knew Eli was a student too. But it's not true, and that's why one has to be very careful about what one says.
Yeah, well, in all honesty, I don't think that I've come to the point where I know who was involved and who wasn't, and it comes out.
Oh, sure.
You talk to enough people, and the story is well known.
I see people here in Israel that were in some of the camps. They recognize me because I was a mature person working there. A lot of them were young kids, and they still recognize me and come up to me, but I would not know. Oh, yes. And some I see, some from the very first camp I worked in Vittel, are friends of mine. I see them. And just as I see a few people who were with the first youth Aliyah group that came here in 1934, and I was here then, and I see these people too. I'm planning one day, you see, my house is not settled yet, it's just about getting settled. I'm planning one day to put a little notice in the paper and ask people who were where I stayed longest was in Pilsen or in Vittel, and I know a lot of those people came here from those 2 points. And also, I brought over the Champollion. I was in charge of that. And we had 1,000 children and 250 adults on it. And I would like to ask some of them to communicate with me. I'm curious to know what they're doing now.
Should be very interesting. Okay, I think that's about it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're very, very welcome.